In this video, we're discussing the purpose question that will come up on the reading passages of the TOEFL test. You may get one or two of these questions for each passage. The idea here is that all good writing, in every piece of it, the sentences all have a purpose. What they're trying to ask you is what a specific phrase or sentence is purpose is in the paragraph or the whole passage. So today we will discuss three main techniques for tackling this type of reading question while also successfully answering a question example. The first strategy that we recommend is understanding the passage as a whole. Now, for the whole reading section, you're going to have to read and understand the whole passage. So this will help you with many of the other questions as well. So don't think of it as a waste of time. Think of it as getting your understanding solidified so that you're able to use that in all the questions for the specific passage. When you are looking at rereading the passage and understanding it, you want to make sure you are able to pick out the topic and whether it's opinionated or factual piece. If it is opinionated, is the opinion positive or negative? These are all things that will help you to understand the passage as a whole and to answer all of the different questions on this section of the exam. So for the sake of this video, we will not be reading this whole passage together, but we'll be pulling out the main topic. The topic here, of course, is Darwin and his Origin of Species. This is a factual reading passage, so there's no opinion. If you find yourself reading it through once and unable to understand, take a second and reread the passage even on the exam to make sure that you are able to understand everything. One last tip here for this first strategy is if you've read the passage a few times and you're having trouble really understanding everything, for this question, just focus on the first paragraph of the passage and whatever paragraph is noted in the question. You can focus mostly on that one and you'll still probably be able to pull out that answer. So like we said, for this specific question, we are talking about Charles Darwin, his theory of evolution. The first paragraph focuses on his background and how he came to be the evolutionist that he was. The second paragraph talks mostly about natural selection and how that works. The third paragraph is what happens through natural selection and kind of that process here. The fourth paragraph, which we will focus on a little bit more for the sake of this specific question, is selective breeding and natural selection. It also talks about a major hole in Darwin's theory. And then we have our conclusion paragraph wrapping up his book on the origin of species and how it is both consequential but also controversial. So we have gone through together strategy number one. Let's look at strategy number two. The second strategy you want to use is to identify linking devices. So what you want to do here are mark the main phrases, ideas, the keywords throughout the passage. For this video, I'm focusing on the most relevant passages for this question. So paragraph 1, the concluding paragraph, and the paragraph that has the prompt sentence that we are focusing on to answer the question. You also want to mark out the phrases or words that are used to transition, like nevertheless, as a result, consequently. This can help you reach an answer by telling you what's going on in that sentence. And I'm also marking words or phrases that seem like they will have a big point towards finding the correct answer here. So let's read this paragraph together and see if we can start trying to answer this question using our strategies. Darwin's theory is that selective breeding occurs in nature as natural selection is the engine behind evolution. Thus, the theory provides an excellent basis for understanding how organisms change over time. Nevertheless, it is just a theory and elusively difficult to prove. One of the major holes in Darwin's theory revolves around irreducibly complex systems. An irreducibly complex system is known as a system where many different parts must all operate together. As a result, in the absence of one, the system as a whole collapses. Consequently, as modern technology improves, science can identify these irreducibly complex systems even at microscopic levels. These complex systems, if so interreliant, would be resistant to Darwin's supposition of how evolution occurs. As Darwin himself admitted, to suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivance for adjusting the focus for different distances, for admitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection, seems, I free confess, absurd in the highest degree. Now, the question is asking us to focus on this quote here towards the end of the paragraph. It asks you, in paragraph 4, what was the author's purpose for including the quote that the belief regarding the human eye being formed by natural selection seems unlikely? So what we're trying to do is figure out why they're using this quote here. Now, one thing you'll probably notice is that since we're quoting Darwin, who lived in the 1800s, some of his words are going to be difficult, even for native English speakers. So don't get nervous when you reread this quote and see inimitable contrivance, or adjusting the focus, or correction of spherical and chromatic aberration. That's okay. You don't need to know the meaning of every single word here. That's not what they're asking you to do. So we've pulled out all of these linking devices and our transition words to tell us what's going on. Beginning of the paragraph is talking about his theory of selective breeding, natural selection, and we notice that the transition word right before the quote says, as Darwin himself admitted. So keep this as in mind as we move forward to strategy number 3. Strategy 3 asks you to eliminate incorrect choices. So now that we've broken down this paragraph in the passage, let's see what we can begin to eliminate. Answer choice A says to provide evidence that irreducibly complex systems exist. Well, as we see here, consequently, as modern technology improves, science can identify these irreducibly complex systems even at microscopic levels. So science is already proving the evidence that these exist. His quote here doesn't seem to mention anything about that specifically, so we can eliminate answer choice A. Now let's reread the quote here and see if we can zero in on something to allow us to eliminate another answer choice. To suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivance for adjusting the focus for different distances, for admitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection, seems, I free confess, absurd in the highest degree. Now, the word I want you to focus on here is absurd. Absurd, if you're not already aware, means ridiculous or very, very silly. So Darwin is saying that some element of his theory here seems silly, ridiculous, or not true. So that means that we can get rid of answer choice C, because he's not supporting his idea here. He is providing some sort of openness for contradiction. Now, if we look at our last 2 answer choices, to prove that natural selection contradicts the basis of his theory of evolution, and to support the claim that natural selection is just a theory and is difficult to prove, at this point, it seems like we are able to confidently choose answer choice D. We've gone through our different strategies here, and these linking devices are the most helpful thing that you can use to choose your correct answer. In the quote, he says, to suppose that the eye does all of the jobs that the eye can do, and that happened through natural selection, seems absurd. So breaking down and restating that quote allows us to choose answer choice D. Another thing to keep in mind as you're working through the purpose question is you're going to need to be very familiar and comfortable with words like this: to refute, to note, to criticize, to illustrate, likely or unlikely. The questions will use something like that when they're asking you why an author did what they did. So why did they use this to refute, or how did they illustrate? So make sure you're comfortable with these kinds of words so that you're ready to answer this type of question. Now, those are our main tips and strategies for tackling the purpose question on the TOEFL reading test. Make sure you follow these 3 strategies and work on being familiar and comfortable with the phrases and words that will come up when you see these types of questions.